Hello, honeys, and happy Tuesday. This episode, we will be featuring Arts World headlines from the 11th through the 17th of August. And without further ado, as we have no administrative announcements or anything like that this week, let's dive in. As we kind of already know and predicted, each of the 9 consecutive days between August 4th and the 13th, a new zoo-themed Banksy mural showed up somewhere in London overnight. Listing them by completion date, first was a mountain goat on a wall buttress, a pair of window elephants, 3 swinging monkeys, a howling wolf, 2 pelicans eating fish, a big cat mid-stretch, a school of fish, and the 8th was a rhino looking like it was mounting a car. The locations of these works seem randomly selected. They include the sides of buildings, a fish and chip shop sign, a police box, bridges, and the last and most recent, another black stencil, was on the security shutters at the London Zoo. That one shows a gorilla lifting up the entrance gate as birds fly away, a sea lion escapes, and 3 sets of eyes peer out from the darkness inside. While we have yet to hear more about the theft of the wolf image last week, the big cat mid-stretch spray-painted image was removed by a local contractor to prevent its theft. The rhino image effect was ruined as well, but less maliciously. According to Art News, quote, a short while after it was found, the animal had been obscured by a competing graffiti artist's tag, and the car was removed, ruining the context, end quote. The sole remaining question to this story is why? All of the images were posted as photos to Banksy's Instagram, but without captions, titles, or any other information. So online speculation about their meaning or meanings has gone nuts. Some of the more popular theories include a possible reference to the recent riots in Britain blamed on the far right, while others believe the animals represent people. This argument is largely based on the fact that the goat has unsure footing in that image. The rocks are slipping from beneath his feet with an actual security camera pointed at the work. So some think Banksy is making a statement here about security states, collective relationships with media, or even the situation facing Palestinians in Gaza. A couple may even have their own solo meanings. The fish, for example, are actually piranhas and may form a possible art historical reference to Damien Hirst's formaldehyde-soaked sharks. Yet others, even more closely associated with the artist, suspect that he's just trying to bring joy. Whatever the case may be, they remain a mystery. We also heard last week that over 300 items from a former MoMA curator's Raymond Pettibon collection will go under the hammer. Pettibon is known for his dark, sardonic style. He was the visual force behind California's punk movement and the artworks of bands like Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys. The auction forms a really rare chance to get some of these iconic punk-era designs for far less than typical prices because of the auction format. It will take place on August 22nd at Wright in Chicago, and ArtNet says it will show these over 300 items from the David Platzker collection, which include flyers, posters, and other ephemera that are kind of rare on the market. A couple of these rare item examples include a skate deck for Black Flag's 1985 album Loose Nut and Black Flag cassettes as well as vintage vinyl. Platzker began collecting these items back in high school in LA during the late 70s and early 80s and curated several Pettibon shows at his gallery later in his career. And honeys, I had to laugh. We've got a new Presley-related fraud this week. So who is it this time? Lisa Finley of Kimberling City, Missouri. She was charged because of an alleged scheme to defraud the Presley family out of both millions of dollars and the ownership of Graceland. Her downfall began in July of 2023, 7 months after Lisa Marie Presley died. ABC News quotes head of Department of Justice Criminal Division Nicole Argentieri that Finley created numerous false documents and sought to extort a settlement from the Presley family, so she was charged with mail fraud and aggravated identity theft. Finley allegedly posed as 3 different people affiliated with a fake private lender by the name of Nauceny Investments to make these false claims that prior to her death, Presley's daughter had put up the famous estate as collateral for a loan she hadn't repaid. Thankfully, Finley is bad at crime, so federal investigators were able to trace several of the aliases and fake private lender information back to Finley. By May of this year, believing her success was close at hand, Finley began making a big public deal out of a planned auction of Graceland. Many found this suspicious, however, so a judge issued a stop order, making that auction impossible for the time being. At this point, a notary by the last name of Philbrook came forward and said that she had never seen the loan documents that she'd allegedly notarized with Lisa Marie signing in her presence before just then. Finley's been indicted by the Western District of Tennessee and, if convicted, faces consequences like a mandatory minimum of 2 years in prison for the aggravated identity theft and a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison for the mail fraud. Also last week, a Madrid man was arrested in connection to the attempted sale of a fake $1.4 million Leonardo da Vinci painting. This one has been a long time coming, honeys. It actually began 2 years ago when French custom agents near Mondon, a city bordering Italy, found this man's expired export license suspicious. Though it was technically legitimate, the expired status of it raised red flags, so the French authorities seized the work. They held it because they believed he was en route to sell the counterfeit, depicting Gian Giacomo Trivulzio, an Italian military commander, to a Milan-based buyer. Had he made it to Milan, he would have charged that buyer the $1.4 million. Likely because of the charged man's nationality, the case was passed to Spain's Policía Nacional the same year to officially arrest him on smuggling charges. Statements released since by Spanish authorities tell us a few things. First of all, the Museo Nacional de Prado in Madrid experts later confirmed that this is a fake made to look like an early 15th to 16th century work. It's not a genuine Da Vinci. These museum experts believe it was painted at the beginning of the 20th century and is more likely worth between 3,000 and 5,000 euros or 32 to 5,400 US dollars. Branching into the literary world a little bit, we were concerned to see that a Tennessee public school has closed its library in response to a book banning law. The school in question is Green High School in Wilson County, Tennessee, and it was done in preparation for the new school year as the staff must now check all collections to ensure compliance with HB 843, which went into effect on July 1st. According to today's sources, the bill, quote, requires schools to maintain and post lists of the materials in their libraries and to evaluate challenged materials to determine whether or not they are age appropriate, end quote. There's multiple reasons we care about this headline, honeys. It draws attention to where we are really at in some states in this nation and the effects of laws like this on educational staff. The reality is that these educators are now spending valuable time double-checking books to be in compliance instead of actually preparing for the students to be able to learn this year. Plus, the wording of this law, the age-appropriate phrase especially, is so subjective, it's a recipe for censorship disaster. HB 843 essentially outlaws not only many classics, but even the Bible, because it focuses specifically on materials that contain, quote, nudity, descriptions or depictions of sexual excitement, sexual conduct, excess violence, or sadomasochistic abuse, end quote. This, in and of itself, is a serious constriction to literary access and learning for students. But furthermore, educators and librarians are expected to evaluate at their own discretion. This means potentially very lopsided and biased applications of the law across the state. The announcement for an investigation surrounding Katy Perry's new music video was made as well. We all know Woman's World was yikes for the producer, poor quality, music video messaging, etc. But on August 13th, Spanish authorities announced an environmental damage case focusing on the music video production for the single Lifetimes. As seen on film and confirmed by Billboard, the video, or parts of it, were filmed on the protected dunes of Sespalmador, which is an eastern coast islet, but the dunes there are some of the most ecologically significant in the Balearics. Ultimately, the issue, according to the Balearic Islands Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Environment, is that the music video's production company did not get the proper authorizations for filming there. The ministry went on to point out this should not have been an issue. Local natural resources management plans exist to outline procedures for this type of situation. They clearly state requirements for authorization for any image or film taking on those dunes for commercial purposes. So Perry and her team don't really have an excuse here, and we will keep an eye on that case. We also heard last week that Houston's Rothko Chapel has been forced to close indefinitely due to hurricane damage. Before making landfall in Texas on July 8th, Hurricane Beryl blazed through parts of the Caribbean as well as the Yucatan Peninsula. It's important to remember first and foremost that Beryl killed 64 people between late June and early July, with the Houston area accounting for almost half of that death toll. The hurricane is estimated to have caused between 28 and 32 billion in damage to the U.S. alone, according to today's sources. The chapel in Houston was directly in the path of the hurricane and houses 14 of Mark Rothko's Seagram mural paintings, 3 of which were damaged, along with parts of the chapel's ceiling and several walls. Chief Executive Director of the chapel, David Leslie, said in Art News, quote, "The closure will ensure the necessary repairs and restoration can be made as effectively and completely as required," end quote, and, quote, "Our focus now is on the restoration of the building and panels and on continuing our mission," end quote. Next, a recently discovered prehistoric calendar may indicate the origins of humanity in the Fertile Crescent. The discovery was made by scientists from the University of Edinburgh, and this calendar is thought to be twice as old as Stonehenge. It could be the world's oldest monument of its kind, in fact. It was uncovered at the Göbekli Tepe archaeological site in Turkey, itself a 12,000-year-old temple-like complex containing many intricate carvings of various symbols. A study published in Time and Mind just this July says that researchers believe those carvings record an instance of comet fragments hitting Earth roughly 13,000 years ago. Says Art News, quote, "Researchers are sure that the most repetitive engravings on the monument track both moon phases and sun cycles, making this site the world's earliest lunisolar calendar by more than a millennium," end quote. So why we care? This shows early humans tracked not only the comet, but its impacts. The carvings document changes in lifestyle, from hunting-gathering to agriculture and this birth of civilization in that area of West Asia because of the comet strike, because it brought with it a miniature ice age that lasted for more than a millennium, really, and led to the extinction of many large animals. These conclusions are supported by a 2021 study published in the journal Earth Science Reviews that indicate these comet fragments likely spurred the growth of human civilization in modern Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Basically, what this means, honeys, is a whole new range of information and potential explorations for archaeologists, anthropologists, historians, etc. And one quick pop culture story before we go. We know that last week, Mark Zuckerberg unveiled a giant statue of his wife, Priscilla Chan. Let's talk about it. So he shared the image on Instagram Wednesday of this 7-foot-tall statue resembling his wife and of Chan standing next to it. Chan made the comment on the post, "The more of me, the better." And I say it that way because it has an actual question mark. Zuckerberg claims that the inspiration was Roman sculpture norms, saying, quote, "Bringing back the Roman tradition of making sculptures of your wife," end quote. The statue was created by New York-based artist Daniel Arsham, and the design features a reflective silver robe wrapped around this bluish-green figure. Responses to it varied, with comparisons being drawn between Roman sculpture, also Terminator 2. Even others say it looks like a Photoshop-smoothed version of the classic weathered Statue of Liberty, or even a character from the Avatar movies. We care about this because it is a very interesting mixed bag response to the idea of making a monument to one's beloved. It leads me to wonder if this were not Zuckerberg, but somebody a little more palatable, would our reactions be any different? We also care because it's Arsham himself. Yes, he works across sculpture, architecture, drawing, and film with this focus of exploring a concept of fictional archaeology, so the sculpture fits right in. But Zuckerberg's choice of Arsham is kind of interesting when you consider that a complaint filed last month with the National Labor Relations Board accused him of violating national labor laws by employees of his studio. Perhaps there's an element of personal connections here. All right, honeys, that is all I have for you this week. Be sure to keep an eye out for our episode coming Thursday about the woman who made Van Gogh a legend. The only reason we really know about him, Miss Johanna Bonger. We will have another Beesness next Tuesday and a honey drop at the end of the month, so keep an eye out for those as well. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and stay hydrated. This podcast and this episode were created, produced, hosted, and researched, as well as fact-checked by yours truly, Celia Bugno. It was edited by our brand new sound engineer and producer of our intro music, Chris Meinhold. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as your social medias.